you want to be a late game Necrotic Warrior, then the Reaper is the way to go. This is my level 50 Reaper Warrior build with all the items and the skill tree you're going to need. So if we jump into the Reaper, this is what we have. We have a whole section here. Now this is the kind of build that is easy to do as you respec. Kind of hard to follow the path in, to be honest. If you were going to do, I would suggest doing the center, coming down here to the right, going up, getting this ready for level 20 and onwards, and then filling out the section inside, as well as coming up here and to the middle. Now the amount of points we have to play with are as follows. And let's jump straight in. So we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to start by coming south to Tumbling Blades. Now I really like this ability, you get to roll and then just strike afterwards. I think it's really helpful. To the top right, we're going to take Rancor. Rage takes 50% longer to begin to decay. I think this is honestly key for any warrior build, let alone a late game Reaper. To the north of that, we're going to take Shield Volley. The Reaper is really built around throwing your shield. So essentially this just allows you to throw it again after you've already caught it. Now coming back down to Rancor, we're going to the bottom right and we're going to take Spectral Bulwark. A really good necrotic, sort of like shield based thing. This is a really helpful spell, or ability I should say, from early game to late game, depending on your skill level with ARPGs. If you're not really good at perfect dodges and perfect deflects, then honestly, you might want to keep this. If you're pretty good at it, then you can always just get rid of it and replace it with the other three. So coming to the south, we are going to take Killer Instinct, Stagger from abilities, plus 20%. Stagger, if you fill that bar up on the enemies, that equals takedowns, and takedowns are incredible damage. To the top right, we're going to take Explosive Toss. Again, just a nice way of buffing up our shield. As you can see there, we can throw it like a grenade almost. It will just explode and do a bunch of damage. Coming south again, we're going to take Innovation. Damage versus barrier, plus 20%. Lots of enemies in this game have armors or barriers, so 20% extra against them just means you get into the hit pools quicker, and you can kill them quicker. To the top right from that, we're going to take Enduring Rage. Your rage no longer decays below 50, allowing you to sustain it between fights. Essentially this means, because your rage is what equals your abilities, this means you'll never drop below one like whole chunk of rage, and some abilities only cost one. For example, no, not in Spectral Bulwark. Is it this one? There you go. This one costs 1 rage, which means if you still had 1 left in the tank, you could immediately do Deadly Ground once you get it, as soon as you enter combat. Now from Enduring Rage, you're going to come south. You can take Depth of Fury, maximum rage plus 50%, unless we're stacking up abilities. Coming back up to Enduring Rage, you're going to go right and take Insidious Rot. Maximum Necrosis stacks plus 1. Necrosis is necrotic damage over time, so the more you stack up, the more damage they'll take over time. And coming south is where we're going to unlock the Deadly Ground. This is a nice area duration ability. Create a necrotic field at your current location. Enemies caught inside take constant damage until they escape, and it gives us enhanced damage. So if you pull aggro, which is really easy to do in this game, you will instantly land extra damage as well as enhanced damage. Coming south again, we're going to take Shellbreaker, damage versus armor this time, 20%. Same philosophy as before, lots of enemies have armor and shields. And coming to the left, Blunt Force. Enemies are knocked down when their armor breaks. Again, lots of enemies have armor. Breaking the armor, you'll knock the enemies onto the floor, makes battlefield control much easier. Now come back up, we're going to go to the top right from Shellbreaker and we're going to take Critical Power. Gain enhanced damage on critical hit kills. To the bottom right, we're going to take Wrath for critical damage plus 10%, and to the north, we're going to take Salt in the Wound, upgrades duration abilities. Hitting enemies with duration ability adds 1 stack to all active afflictions on the target, therefore it would tank very well with Deadly Ground. Come back to Critical Power, we're going to go north and we're going to take Death's Blessing to buff our necrotic damage by 10%. And we're going to continue north again to Seething Pitch. Shield Toss now generates 2 additional rage on impact. Striking weak points doubles the effect. Therefore, we basically get more rage whenever we throw our shield. And because this build is all about necrotic damage and shield throws, extra rage, just more abilities, it's a nice little circle and loop you make of just never ending, filling up those gauges. Coming north again, we're going to get Mortal Wounds, that's weak point damage plus 10. And north again to Master Throw. Hold R2 and you get to charge up your shield to an additional level just for enhanced damage. Now at this point we're going to fill out our skill tree here. Just take these as you go if you aren't respecing, if you're taking this level by level from the start of the game. And fill up as much as you can, and whatever you can't do, just work your way through the rest of the skill tree like I said. But this is where we're going to go into our Reaper Specialization from the Morn Watch. And our ultimate ability of Spirit Storm. This is a really good necrotic based whirlwind attack. It's awesome. To the top right again, we're going to take Reaper. This is an ability that detonates weakened, costs 2 rage to do, so bear that in mind. And it calls also an ethereal scythe that slashes and slices your enemies. More importantly though, it applies Siphoned. Now Siphoned is obviously damage over time, but it also heals us in return. Now please note, because this is a duration ability, it will stack with Salt in the Wound, so it'll gain an extra stack of Siphon. Now from here we're going to fill up both skill trees, so to the bottom left we are going to take Death's Blessing for necrotic damage plus 10%. Below that for Reckless Shot, projectile abilities deal 25% more damage but consume 10% health. Bear that in mind because this will pair very nicely with one of our abilities. Going back up to Death's Blessing, we're going to go to the top right and take Death's Throw. So convert shield toss damage to necrotic damage, which is great because now we've also buffed our necrotic damage by 10% a few times. To the bottom right, we're going to take Invigoration, Leech Effectiveness plus 20%. And to the south, we're going to take Living Decay. Your necrotic damage now has 50% penetration and restores 2% of your health. So Reapers are really good at damaging enemies with necrotic damage, but also siphoning their health back, sort of to constantly buff yourself up and keep topping up those healing hit points. And to the top right, we're going to take Desperation, gain bonus damage relative to the amount of health to your target and you have lost. Then we come back to our Reaper ability, we can go north, and we're going to take Devastation, Affliction damage plus 10% and Affliction duration plus 20%, which means we buff and damage our Necrosis and our Siphons do, as well as the duration of them. To the top left, we're going to take Death's Touch, upgrades duration abilities. When any duration ability is active, your charged attacks also apply Necrosis to enemies. Back to Devastation, we're going to go to the top right and take Perfect Throw. So release Shield Toss at the moment a new charge level is attained to gain bonus damage and bounces. Now this is obviously something you have to time. If you can do it right, then extra damage, why not? If not, it's not the biggest loss. You still have enhanced damage thanks to all the other stuff. But if you can land this, it is pretty good. To the north, Shattering Throw, so Shield Toss damage plus 10% and a Shield Toss bounce plus 1. Now remember, we're getting our Shield Toss bounces here now, because that will play a part later in the build. To the top left, we're going to take Killing an Enemy spawns a necrotic projectile that follows enemies. And to the very north of this skill tree, Let It Linger. Shield Toss bounces now apply an affliction based on your shield's damage type. So this should be necrotic, and you'll keep stacking necrosis. And then we've got that loop of how our abilities are now, our afflictions are now doing more damage and lasting longer and all that fun stuff. Now we come back to the Reaper ability and back to Master Throw. Coming south to the ability we've already taken of Mortal Wounds, we're going to come to the left and we're going to take Bloody Advance. Now this applies Sundered and is a projectile ability, so it benefits from everything in our skill tree. And it applies Bleeding, which is really cool. And if you have a charged shield tossed, it will burst damage to nearby enemies for enhanced damage. Now at this point we're going in two directions. We're going to go left first, and we're going to take Necessary Steps, primary duration plus 20%. Not ideal, but what we do want is a double shot. Activating any projectile ability also launches a projectile, dealing 100 damage to a nearby enemy, instantly buffing our Bloody Advance. Now south of Bloody Advance we are going to take Ricochet Shot for another shield toss bounce, that's now plus 2. To the right we're going to take Lingering Decay, duration abilities apply Necrosis on impact, and to the bottom left, Shot Chaser. Using a projectile ability deals an additional 10% damage relative to the number of shield toss bounces. So as I said, to remember how many shield toss bounces we've got, we now do an extra 20% from having the two stacked up. Now if we come all the way back down here to our Spectral Bulwark and we go to top right to enrage that we already have, we're going to come north and we're going to take Karam. Enemies take 100% more damage and stagger from environmental impacts. This honestly isn't important. What is important is following it north to Innovation, 20% versus Barrier. To the top left, Electric Armorer. So while we're in different classifications of Helmet Armor, we get ranged attack damage plus 15%, weak point damage plus 15%, and 2 extra shield toss bounces, putting us at 4 total and 40% extra damage. and we are using different helms and armours. To the north, we're going to take Desolate Malady, affliction damage plus 10% to boost our necrosis and siphon. To the top left, Staggering Toss. Shield Toss converts 25% of the current rage into stagger. Top left again for improved throw for another 10% shield toss damage. And top left again for return to sender. A nice way if you can time this perfect defense of sending projectiles back at enemies. To the bottom left this time, we're going to come down to get Bulwark for physical resistance 10% just to tank ourselves up. And we're going to come north of the skill tree for Providence for an advantage duration plus 20%. Not ideal, but what we do want is to come to the top right to gain Masochism, generate 4 rage when taking damage, which is key. We can go top left for improved health, plus 100, and then top right for Masochism, 4, Depth of Fury for another maximum rage plus 50%. Coming to the top left to meet in the middle for Groundbreaker, an ability that isn't really necessary for this. If you want to use it, you could. But to the top right, we're going to take Traumatize for the takedown damage plus 15%, and to the top left for Ready Guard, gain Deflect at the start of each encounter. Deflect is really good because essentially ignores the next impact received, so you're just tanking yourself up for free. We're going to come to the north, maximum Deflect stacks plus 1 for Refract, and to the bottom left from that, Good Arm. When a projectile ability hits an enemy, the damage ignores all resistances, which is perfect for our necrotic damage. Now when it comes to items and abilities, you want to use as many of these items as you can. You might have them more leveled up. Less leveled up, you might have ones that are similar, not quite the same. Use ones as close to this as possible. But what we're going to be using for this is the Dark Shard plus 8. This is a necrotic based sword with extra necrotic resistance as you level it up. 15% necrotic damage as you level it up. Critical hits apply necrosis if not already applied. And whenever necrosis is applied to a target, instead of an affliction, deal 100 necrotic damage in an area around them. For a shield, we're going to take the Captain's Heater. Nice little shield for stagger, 1000 stagger, but more importantly, 30 defense, 100 health, 10% resistances, and weapon damage increased by 15% of the sum of all your resistances. For a two-handed weapon, we're going to use the Crystalline Great Axe plus 8. Now this is a cold based weapon, however, the benefit is necrotic bonus also affects this weapon's base damage. So essentially we're buffing this up. We even put a rune of plus 10% weapon damage on it. Now for a helmet, we're going to use the Golden Cascade plus 8, 20% stagger, 25% takedown damage. Now 15% stagger relative to Lords of Fortune ally strength is really helpful as well late game. And gain health, ultimate and rage on takedowns. Amount is doubled if lethal. Really nice helmet for boosting your stagger to get that stagger bar full. Boosting your takedown damage to kill enemies quicker. And a nice way of gaining health, ultimate and rage if it's a lethal strike. Now that is a heavy helm, and if we come to our armor, we're using light armor for this. Reason being is plus 15% necrotic damage and 25% necrotic resistance ties very nicely in with the shield, where the weapon damage increased by 15% of the sum of all resistances. We're also using the necrotic ability, cleanses all afflictions, and gain immovable if not already granted when you take necrotic damage. For items, I really like the Tincture Kit, 20% healing and a revival charge, makes you nice and tanky. A Pale Reflection for an amulet, 20% damage versus enemies with low health. Standard enemies are always considered to have low health, and defeating enemy grants 5% ultimate. For a ring, the Call of the Hall, 50% takedown damage, 50% stagger, gain a random advantage on takedown. Again, a nice way of just boosting our stagger bar to the max, and then taking down enemies for the kill shots. And for your other ring, the Precious Decay, 15% necrotic damage to really buff that up, 25% necrotic resistance to tie into our armor and our shield, and eventually 20% necrotic ability damage versus health. 50% of all your other damage types bonuses contribute to your necrotic damage bonus. Precious Decay is an awesome ring for this. Okay, for your abilities, we're going to use the Bloody Advance. So this is your projectile necrotic based spell that applies, ability that applies Sundered. Deadly Ground, so another duration necrotics ability that is really good and only costs 1 rage. Of course, the Reaper ability, because this is amazing and it detonates weakened. And for your ultimate, of course, we're using the Spirit Storm because we want that Whirlwind. And then for your runes, obviously these are probably going to change depending on what you're doing. For example, if you're going against Darkspawn, you probably want to use a fire-based rune. But if you just want to leave runes on there for the passives, then Ascend for 10% damage. Toss for an additional shield toss bounce to then benefit from that extra 10% damage from our skill tree. And Assail, 10% charged attack damage, which actually isn't the right one. It was actually meant to be this one, which is Shatter. I knew it was a red one. And that is for 10% ranged attack damage. That's the key here. Okay, we are in the combat now, just as proof, because I know some people care about this. Combat present underdog, and it's I said the word wrong, but they're going to ignore it. What we are going to do is we're going to go find some enemies. So, it's been a long day, guys. Right, here we go. Now, as you said, we can charge up our shield, and look at that. Look at all the shield throws. We can also do our projectiles. So, for example, if we were to come in here, and you'll see the necrosis, and you'll see just how much we're doing. And as you can see, we're stacking up necrosis, and it is doing a huge amount of damage. Even our base sword is really good. If we go two-handed, there you go, you can see that. And we're going to keep showing off our abilities as I get walloped by something. There we go. Now, if we were to come in here, we could do our like that. This gives them necrosis, 4 stacks of it, as you can see. And we can stay in here and we can just keep charging up our shield. We could even do a explosive shield like that. And there you go, got the necrosis and bleed going. And you'll see just how much we do if we just do heavy attacks. And as you can see, the other guy has a shield, so if we were to do that, it will still break their shield through, even though if we go to attack them, it is blocked. Now if we get the scythe out like that, you'll see we do a huge amount of damage with Necrotic. And just a simple shield throw, if we can get through the shield, there you go, 2,000 damage. And obviously when doing this yourself, you're going to want to play a bit more tactically, or not even tactically, but more clever. I'm just, pressing all the buttons to try and show you everything going. But if we were to do our ultimate, let's see if we can get a few enemies together. This will do. If we come here, and as you can see, we now have our siphoned. And what we can do is if we throw our shield like that, we'll get necrosis too. And you'll see they've got so many afflictions they're now suffering from. And you can even hit them with a projectile like this, get more necrosis going. You could even pop yourself down here if you know they're going to be stationary and you've aggroed enough to do things like that. And look at that, with the heavy attack we just did 6,000 damage. And just like that, lots of easy ways to get bleed, necrosis siphoned, get all those afflictions going. Your rage generates so quick. As I get stuck. And even if you just hold it, land in those shield throws. As well as your projectiles like this, getting the weakened, the blighted, all sorts is just... It's such an easy and fun build to do, and it's so good at just tearing through multiple enemies. And as you can see, it pairs so nicely with enemies, or sorry, with allies attacks as well. So that is this build. It's all about just getting as much necrotic damage and all sorts as possible. So I really hope you enjoyed. If you have, please let me know in the comments below what abilities you would use and all that fun stuff, what other items, if there's any other skills from the skill tree you would take. Even already, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more. I've got other builds, I've got more Let's Plays, I've got streams of this game, as well as other games like Baldur's Gate and whatnot. And hopefully, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.